I don't know if this is everybody's opinion, but this is probably the most famous 3-chorded intro for sitting in a corner and cutting yourself thinking about past loves. The song is Boys Don't Cry. It's by The Cure off their 1980 album Boys Don't Cry. And it's also number 438 out of 500 on the Spotify original, The 500, with me, Josh Adam Myers, the King Cadoodle, the King of Fleas. Thank you for joining me on the only podcast that's going through Rolling Stone Magazine's list of the top 500 albums. And man, this was a good one. I feel like I say that every week, you know what I mean? But dude, I'm digging this shit. Hope you guys are too. Thank you to everybody that reached out to me about the Bill Burr Presents on Comedy Central, about the set. I really, really mean this from the bottom of my heart, man. To be able to connect with all of you and see you guys, like, just the emails we're getting, just the Instagram comments, the Twitter whatever it is. Like, you guys are the shit, and thank you for the kind words, because it was really important to me to get that set on television, and especially on such a dope show like Bill Burr Presents The Ringers. The Ringers. Hey, Ringers, do your Instagram stories this week. Don't sleep on your ways to spread the word, the gospel of the 500, because I appreciate it, Fleece Army. Give me those 24-hour ads on your social media. Take a screenshot of how you're listening to the 500 and tag me at Josh Adam Myers. Tag our Instagram handle at the 500 podcast, and then put a hashtag Fleece Army, and then throw a new hashtag Cadoogle or even Doogle. I like Doogle. That might be a new thing. All right, let's get into the record, guys. Released on February 5th of 1980 and produced by Chris Perry, this was the first album by the British post-punk trio The Cure, released in the U.S. However, it was basically a compilation of several tracks from their UK debut. God, I don't know how to say debut. From the UK album, first album, that's better than debut, 3 Imaginary Boys, and other songs they recorded between 1978 and 1979. That was when I was born. The intention was to reach more listeners and expand the band's exposure outside of the UK. The band was originally formed as Malice in West Sussex, England in 1976 by Notre Dame Middle School classmates Robert Smith on vocals and guitars, Michael Dempsey on bass and vocals, and Lawrence Lol Tolhurst on drums, although they went through several lineup changes before becoming a trio and changing their name to The Easy Cure. That's not that bad. The Easy Cure? What is it, Robitussin? What just call yourself Robitussin? The group played dark, angular, minimalist rock songs with coldly presented, deceptively emotional lyrics, including literary references. In 1977, after winning a talent competition, the band got signed to a German label, although after hearing their demos, including the Albert Camus-inspired song Killing an Arab, they declined to release anything by The Easy Cure. By the time Chris Perry, an A&R representative at Polydor Records, heard that song's demo, the band had already shortened their name to The Cure. Perry liked it and produced it as a single on the independent label Small Wonder in December of 1978. Then they released their debut, 3 Imaginary Boys, followed by their second single, Boys Don't Cry. The band then went on their first big tour, opening for gothy post-punk Susie and the Banshees. During that tour, a defining musical moment for the band occurred after Robert Smith was also recruited to replace Banshees guitarist John McKay, who abruptly quit. As Smith recalled, on stage that first night with the Banshees, I was blown away by how powerful I felt playing that kind of music. It was so different to what we were doing with The Cure. Before that, I'd wanted us to be like the Buzzcocks or Elvis Costello, the punk Beatles. Being a Banshee really changed my attitude to what I was doing. That inspired their third single, Jumping on Someone Else's Train, which came out later that year. The band then prepared demos for their second album, 17 Seconds, while the Boys Don't Cry record was being compiled for release in America. Up until then, all the songs were written by the 3 members, but Robert Smith's desire to make more esoteric music like the Banshees bumped up against Michael Dempsey's vision of being more like pop-punk new waver's Ecstasy, so he was replaced in the band's ever-changing lineup. Boys Don't Cry was well received in America, and the band began a world tour which showcased their new, darker goth style. It became and remains their trademark despite all the upbeat pop-punk hits they put out, as much as frontman Robert Smith's wild explosion of black hair, smeared red lipstick, and baggy dark clothes. And with Smith being the only consistent member during their whole career, as of now, The Cure have put out 13 albums, 2 EPs, 30 singles, sold millions, won a bunch of awards, and in 2019 were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've inspired countless artists, including Nine Inch Nails, Placebo, Interpol, My Chemical Romance, The Deftones, The Smashing Pumpkins, and even Adele. And my guest today, man, oh man, was she influenced by this band. The one and only Margaret Cho. Margaret is one of my favorite comics working today. She's a legend. Maybe you've seen her special, Psycho. Maybe you've seen Cho Dependent. Maybe you've seen Beautiful, Revolution, Assassin, Notorious CHO. She is one of my favorites. She was the first Asian American to have a sitcom on network television. She's also a trailblazing advocate for the LGBTQ community and so sex positive. Also, she's got an incredible podcast, The Margaret Show, anywhere you get your podcast. And also, she is so goth, it's not even funny. She was the perfect guest for this episode. Rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the 500 and listen free on Spotify or anywhere you get your pods. Follow me at Josh Adam Myers on all social media. Email the podcast at 500podcast@gmail.com. And for all things 500, go to our website, the500podcast.com. Well, guys, nothing left to say, but here we go with number 438 out of 500. With Boys Don't Cry by The Cure. Margaret Cho and a Margaret Cho and a Cho. I said a Margaret, Cho.
So good.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
I've been working on that for actually
it.
knowing once I booked you, I was like, all right, what song do I sing her into?
It's perfect.
Thank you. So I sent a Hail Mary hoping that you were a Cure fan, and you immediately came back and said you were.
I'm a huge Cure fan.
Tell me about your experience. Like, how did you first hear about The Cure?
Well, in San Francisco, where I grew up, they had changed the format of the classic rock radio station, and it was Live 105 New Wave. And it was like one of the wave of like stations that were starting. I think 99X in San Diego was another one. Of course, K-Rock here was another one. They were changing their formats to modern rock, and you were getting a selection of these local bands, which in San Francisco, which was super cool. But then you were also getting the sort of first new wave British invasion, when they were calling the second British invasions, with the 80s. And one of those was The Cure. And I think the first song that I probably heard was either, it was a little bit later, actually. So it would have been like Love Cats or The Walk. And my first Cure album was Japanese Whispers, which is actually kind of I realize it is kind of a B-sides compilation record. It's funny when you have these bands that are so iconic like The Cure, and you really have a hard time finding the albums as they were put out back in the day.
Oh yeah, I had a hard time finding this, and then I found out it was a part of another record.
Right. Like, or you have people putting their on their streaming service, you have people putting the record together from the bits and pieces that they find. Yeah. So it's really interesting how the way that we like listen to music retroactively after the band is like been around forever and put out a lot of greatest hits compilations, you don't get the full picture of what they were doing with each record. So it was a great thing to go back and revisit that.
Yeah. So what year is this? This is like when this is starting to get into your life.
When I was really listening to The Cure, this is probably 1984. And I also that summer went to England, which is like amazing. So this is like the beginning of goth. I mean, the 84, 85, I went to England for the summer because my friend was, she was British. And so she spent the summer holidays with her grandparents in Bournemouth, which is very far in the south. I mean, really, it's like, that's more like the Jersey Shore of England. If you go to the north, that's where it's real cold, and that's where all this kind of music is kind of from, I think. Yeah. So you have a different sense of what England is about. But they're
Hello, Snooky. How are you? Oh, it's the situation. So wonderful.
it's the situation.
Do you want to go GTL?
Yes.
Gym tanning laundry. Oh, terrific. And maybe we'll have some plum pudding afterwards, Snooky.
Oh, yes. It's very different. But we were going, and there was, I think, there was a goth club that we would go to, and we would hear a lot of the songs, from this particular record, a lot of Cure songs, and also lots of Susie. And
Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lots of
For
Bauhaus.
so long, I thought that was sushi. Sushi.
Sushi.
Well, we learn something every day. Police Army. All right, so you're in England. You're going to goth clubs.
And I at that time, they didn't have goth clothing, really. So you had to kind of piece it together from old ladies' clothes. Like old dead people clothes. That was like kind of like where you would figure out where your goth came from. Like ruffled shirts that you could wear at
Where'd you get that shawl from? From my Aunt Gertie.
Yes.
Aunt Gertie's goth as fuck. All right. What about
yeah.
Mildred? Well, she ain't got shit.
You would have to like put together the goth outfit from like velvet suits from the 70s, which is, like your mom's jacket, and like men would wear their mom's clothes, and you would take that shawl and put it over your head, and make kind of like this mystical like Lena Lovitch thing. It was It was all about Lena Lovitch and crazy like hair. I had really a weird pink. They were not exactly braids. They weren't dreadlocks. They were just kind of pink attachments. I don't know exactly how I got my hair like that. It was really long. It was almost down to my waist, and it was very woolly. But they weren't dreads. It was not exactly. It was like extensions, I guess. I must have had extensions of some kind.
Sure.
And we would go down and we would go to these goth clubs, and it was everything. And I think my favorite was probably the Mission UK. I love The Damned. We would watch The Young Ones on MTV in America and long for England. And, I was a real Anglophile. I still am.
Yeah.
And I actually dated a guy who, much later, who was in the Cure touring group, and also he was a member of the Psychedelic Furs, and also he is a Banshee, but he's not an earlier Banshee, so he was a later Banshee later in the tour.
So he's not fully accepted by the Banshee community, right?
No.
They're just like, dude, you're not early Bansh?
Steve Severin told me, don't talk about him as one of the Banshees because he's not officially a Banshee, but he is in our band. But that's
I'm a mid-century Bansh. I just love that so much. There's probably fans of the band out there that are like, no, I can't recognize him.
I know.
I don't
came know.
In after the fourth album.
Yeah.
I just can't.
So they don't accept it as that, but he sort of helped me like understand a lot of the guitar tones, and it's a very specific kind of playing. If you go back and listen to these records, you can really hear the hollow tone of the Gretsch.
Tell me about why The Cure resonated with you at that time.
Well, it had to do with this real rejection of the way that rock was. Rock used to be these very, very loud, boisterous bands that were hyper masculine.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting into my favorites were always the glam guys like David Bowie, of course, and Mark Bolan.
Yeah.
But you didn't have that sensibility with Led Zeppelin's very, very masculine. And then you had AC/DC and all of the stuff that I love, but it's not. The thing about The Cure was that it was sexually ambiguous. Even though you knew they were guys and you knew they were straight, they love cats and they love the color gray. And there was something about that was really appealing. And this guy who wore lipstick and big white puffy shoes and all black, and he was like your perfect goth boyfriend who would kind of wear your makeup, but he would eat you out forever, which would mess up his lipstick. And
that's how Robert Smith got it smeared.
Yeah, it was just all that pussy eaten. And I mean, the love songs were so romantic, even though they're a little bit quirky. And then his voice is it's like a howl, and it's a very animal voice, which the only other time I've heard a voice like that would be in a current band called the Black Kids. And the guy has that sort of kind of howl, but it's very unusual. You would never really hear it in rock and roll.
Yeah.
So this is what I really think that Robert Smith's voice is probably the most important instrument in The Cure, because it is used not just as like singing, but it's an instrument.
100%. I mean, he is the star of all of this.
Yes.
And it's like, because you can hear this style of guitar playing and this style of music in a lot of the post-punk stuff that was coming out. Because I don't want to call this new wave. Like, I don't know. I feel like this album in particular falls into more of a post-punk.
Yeah.
It hasn't. I feel like there's the beginning of goth.
Yeah.
Like there's sadness kind of linking. It's very melancholy, but at the same time, there's some like the songs are kind of poppy to the point where it's like his lyrics might be a little sad, but the music is like, oh, this is kind of an upbeat little squiggly dude. You know what I mean?
It doesn't dwell on it like Morrissey and the Smiths really dwell on it, or even Bauhaus or Peter Murphy really dwell on this very dark place. But the way I think there is a real optimism in the way that Robert Smith writes lyrics and the way he sings.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of foppishness, a real dandy. You know, like you could see his lace, like cuffs getting caught in the guitar strings. Like it's just a very like when you're playing with like all that like a long cuff like that.
Fruff. He's got a lot of fruff.
Yeah, it's going to get tangled up in the strings, and that's the sort of like thunk that you hear. But it's really, I mean, it's stylish. It's like amazing when you can hear a band the way they look.
Yeah. Oh, completely.
You know?
Completely. All right, just so everybody knows, our album is number 438 out of 500. It's a compilation album, Boys Don't Cry by The Cure, released on February 8th, 1980, and produced by Chris Parry, or Perry, P-A-R-R-Y. So this was my first real like dive into The Cure other than Love Song and like the hits. Like I loved that song Close to Me?
Yeah.
But I liked they did like a B-side electro version of it, a little bit slower. I loved that song, and I've always liked The Cure and the songs that I heard. The only song that I kind of got tired of was Love Song, mostly because I had a bunch of friends that I grew up with, all jockish type guys that I went to high school with, and they loved the band 311, and I think 311 is the worst music. White people should not do reggae. They shouldn't. It's a proven fact. We should not. What do you know about Ja? You grew up in Irvine. Do you know what I mean? So they loved 311 so much, and 311 covered Love Song by The Cure, and 4 people got married in the early 2000s, and that was their first dance.
Oh, okay.
But not the Cure version,
right.
The shitty 311 version.
Yeah.
So I kind of went into The Cure knowing the history, but also when I dived into this record, I was like, okay, like let's see what this is about. Am I going to dig it? So this is what I originally wrote after my first pass. I said, it's a good record, but I don't think it showcases why people love The Cure so much. There's a lot that I loved, but it ultimately had a lot of songs that just didn't stick with me. Now, I listened to these albums like 8 times. So this is what I got on the 7th. I was just like, after a bunch of listens, like I can hear where the influence of The Cure laid upon music in the early 2000s. And a lot of the bands that I loved, like Interpol, Block Party, The Stills, The Strokes. And then when I did the research and found out that this was a compilation record of all their earlier stuff as a way to like hit the U.S. market and really take off.
Yeah.
And this is really them before they went fully goth, before Robert started playing guitar and touring with Susie and the Banshees. Yeah, but this was all before that, and this is kind of like right at the turn where they're about to get really dark, and the goth is really going to come out.
Yeah.
And knowing what was going on at the time, knowing about all of that stuff, I was like, man, this is a fun record.
Yeah.
Like even just the way that it starts. So let's dive into the record because we have some really fun songs on here. All right, so the album opens with probably the most famous 3 chords this band has ever played. Peter, play the intro for me. you don't have to know The Cure to know this song.
Right.
This was so great. This was actually a UK standalone single from '79. And when I was talking about how this is pre-goth, I feel like this is more proto-emo than proto-goth.
Yeah.
And it's just a great pop apology to a lover taking responsibility for one's transgressions. Like, tell me about, like, how do you feel about this song?
I think it's a beautiful song. It's really a meaningful song. This is like the first song that I think that where you feel like The Cure is fully realized their potential as a band, and and the perspective of men allowing themselves to be emotional, to wear makeup, to be foppish and dandyish, and
I love those words.
Yeah, but they get tons of pussy. Like, it's like he's not. It's like this rejection of toxic masculinity before we even codified what toxic masculinity was. So it's I think it's a beautiful song. It's a really queer song, because a lot of queers, myself included, we really got into this because it's also it's this rejection of traditional gender roles. And of course, it's a perfect thing that this is also a very famous movie, Boys Don't Cry, with Hilary Swank, the story of Brandon Teena, which I think now people have a different sort of remembrance of because of the way that we look at transgender culture now. We prefer transgendered actors play transgender roles. Yeah. But at that time, this was a very important film. And this song was perfect to kind of note that, so it's a queer anthem, and it's a wonderful song.
It's a great song. Great song. And also there's so much truth to it. So these lyrics that I pulled out is, I would break down at your feet and beg forgiveness, plead with you. Then it says, so I try to laugh about it, cover it all up with my lies. And I get that. You know what I mean? Because why can't men cry?
Yeah.
Why? I talk about how I cry a lot. Mm-hmm. I cried today.
Good.
I cry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sometimes when I tell people, I was listening to Don McLean's Vincent, and it just got really emotional thinking about my friend that passed away. Mm-hmm. And some people are like, oh, no, I get it. And then other people sometimes give you the side eye, especially guys, who they're kind of like, wow, you cry like that? So that's why I think this song is the title of the record. That's why I think it is, like you said, this queer anthem, because it's really just Robert laying it out there, being very open and honest. Let me ask you this. Have you ever made someone have a cry?
Yes. But it's not it's never my intention, but you do come across that sometimes. And it's very important. I think people should let their emotions out. If they don't, you can have a lot more problems. So I want men to be able to express themselves more. So it's good.
Do you have any, what was the first time you've made a man cry? I think it might have been my dad, actually. We've all made our dads cry.
Yeah. Well, I made my dad cry because he is a very famous womanizer. And so he was constantly leaving my mom over, throughout the 70s and 80s. But, he'd always come back. And, when I remember the first time I really asked him not to leave. And then he started crying. And I was really shocked. Because I was like, I'd never seen that. I'd never seen any man in my family cry. So it was really shocking. And then I realized I had an awesome power. And then it was like this great thing, that you could see men really feel. Because men in Korea are very hyper masculine, and they don't have that sort of emotional thing. And they blow gaskets because they don't.
Yeah.
That's why they love golf. They can hit things. So it's definitely something that I didn't experience growing up as much, but now I'm really appreciative of men who are emotional.
That goes into Plastic Passion. Now, this was a B-side of Boys Don't Cry. Peter, play the first verse for me.
Plastic passion is hard to handle. Plastic passion is a sold-out scandal.
Actually, it's funny because bassist Michael Dempsey encouraged the drummer Lowell Tolhurst to speed it up and play this jerky drum pattern similar to the other new wave bands that he wanted to sound like. So this is like them right at the beginning. You're coming off that post-punk sound, and this is actually one of the reasons why Robert Smith kicked Dempsey out of the band shortly after, because he wanted it to sound like other bands, and Robert wanted to kind of create his own sound.
Oh, interesting.
Which is really interesting.
That is interesting.
The lyrics have been rumored to be about vibrators or blow-up dolls, but they're most likely simply about how inconsequential love and passion cheapens the experience. I kind of think it's about blow-up dolls because the opening lyrics are plastic passion is hard to handle. Plastic passion is a sold-out scandal. If you got caught fucking a blow-up doll, that's a scandal.
Yeah.
100%. And also, they're probably hard to handle. You know, the air consistency, maybe one half of the body is got more air than the other half. So it's like trying to fuck on a waterbed. Like, you know how impossible
Oh, I know.
that is?
It's really impossible. But I think the blow-up dolls, I feel like the technology's really improved now. So it's like, I mean, like we have the real dolls.
Oh,
which
there's
are
no more
awesome.
blowing up anymore.
Yeah,
It
you don't
is
have to blow it up.
a life-size human.
I would just like, I want to get like a mold of my asshole and make it like, you know, sell it at shows. Because
Good merch. That's solid merch.
I mean, it's solid merch because if you get like a mold made and then, because that's always the first thing that everybody goes for on my body is my asshole. You would think that they would go for something else, but it just straight there.
Really?
Yeah, that's like if you drop a pin in my locations, it's my asshole. I don't know why. It's right there. So anyway, this plastic passion is probably about, I think you're right. It's about blow-up dolls and the passion that is I don't know, so maybe somehow false or elastic?
Sure. I mean, I let me look at some of the lyrics real quick. Plastic passion is the lady's lover. It's the marble mother. It is a diamond delight. A nadir of night is a gold guarantee. Is murdering me.
Oh, so maybe it's like about vibrator jealousy. You know how sometimes dudes get jealous if you use your vibrator, and then like get kind of like, well, you know, they don't.
I got
like
a penis.
Yeah, I mean, there's no competition. It's just an enhancement. But sometimes people are like against toys.
No, I know what you mean. I love sex. It's great, but no one knows you like you know you.
Yes. So, and I think toys are a good invention, especially if you're having female to female sex. You really do. I really think that's the best thing about queerness is having toys. I love sex toys.
You got a lot of them?
Oh, God. I actually unearthed a box yesterday from 2008 that I hadn't opened since 2008. It was like a time machine of sex toys. And there's some weird shit in there.
What do you got?
I had this thing called the octopus, which is like a robot that you put on the head of a cock. That's like it wraps around, like kind of like Alien, like wraps around the head of stuff.
Yeah, dude.
And
a
it
xenomorph.
yeah, it's like it wraps around the head, and I have no idea what it does, but I'm charging it now. And I found.
So you're ready to go tonight as soon as this is over?
Yeah,
you're gonna put the octopus on?
I'm charging everything. I have a bunch of dildos, a bunch of Kegel sizers, which were very hot in 2008, which were like barbells for your pussy.
Yeah, I remember Kegels.
Yeah, just turn them up, turn it up. So I found all those. So I'm charging everything. So we'll see what still works.
Yeah, I can tell you've been telling me to rush through this. You're like,
let's
all
go,
right,
let's go.
hurry
Come on,
up.
come on.
Go to track 3. Track 3, 10:15 Saturday night. Peter, play. This is one of my favorite parts of the whole record. There's this fading harmonic into a loud guitar solo from this song. So go ahead and play that for me, Peter. I heard so many different bands when I heard this song.
Mm-hmm.
All the early 2000s, the whole new, I guess we would call like post-punk. I just heard Interpol and all of these bands that I saw at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of it lyrically, I think this song is a perfect encapsulation of teenage angst and the torture of temporary sadness and what it feels like that it will go on forever.
Yeah.
Just everything Robert is saying. So when Robert Smith spoke about this song, he says this was written at a kitchen table watching the tap dripping, feeling utterly morose, drinking my dad's homemade beer. My evening had fallen apart, and I was back at home feeling very sorry for myself. And then I found out that he wrote this when he was 16 years old. Just, I mean, 16?
Yeah,
that's about as
that's
angsty
great. Yeah.
as you can get.
Yeah.
When I was 16, I took LSD and reenacted my own childbirth in front of my whole family.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
That's great.
We've never talked about it again.
That's really great. That's very creative.
Thank you. It was,
I like that.
you know, sometimes that's what you do. You got to take your clothes off and you got to run 3 miles and then, you know, wake your parents up and roll around the floor and go, So,
that's great.
It was great.
How fun.
I also heard a lot of like White Stripes. And
Definitely.
Black Keys.
Yeah, definitely.
In that guitar solo. Let me ask you something. How did you express your teenage angst?
I think Acid was a good one.
Yeah.
Acid was really good. We would go to this place called Barrington Hall. It's not there anymore. It's in Berkeley, where we would like party with the UC Berkeley crowd, and we would take tons of acid and tons. We do candy flipping, which is ecstasy and acid together, which is like nuts. And some of my friends had gone to Père Lachaise in the cemetery in Paris and stolen a lot of graveyard dirt from Jim Morrison's grave. So we would like rub it all over our bodies, which is like so crazy. Wear a lot of patchouli. And it was really very goth, but also kind of dirty and kind of expressive and druggy, but fun.
All right. Well, then I wanted to ask you this. Like, what performers and artists influenced you early on? So while you were in your teens, like who were you like fucking with? Who influenced you?
Oh, probably Bjork from the Sugar Cubes.
Oh,
definitely.
my God.
Sugar Cubes Bjork.
The most adorable
The cutest.
human being I have
Oh
ever
my God.
seen, especially
So cute.
with the Sugar Cubes.
Yeah,
with
so
the little
cute.
little doodad hair. She had those little like puff balls.
Amazing.
Oh.
Like so cute. And then, of course, I love Bjork on her own. She's a genius, but definitely Bjork, definitely David Bowie. Probably, this particular song actually reminds me of the Stranglers, who I also love too.
Yeah.
A Psychedelic Furs, major. It's Susie and the Banshees, I think, really sort of made me feel like adult. Like that's the first time I kind of thought about like darkness and goth and like that I might be goth, kind of identifying that you're goth.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. Moving on to accuracy. Peter, play the chorus.
Accuracy. Accuracy.
In the 70s, guitars were so muscular and then thick, and you would hear like they would double track. Sometimes just really like heavy on the sound, but this is the opposite direction where you just really have just one guitar.
Yeah.
And it's very twangy and it's very hollow. And I like the spareness of that and then the percussive quality of the guitar when it comes to that. So to me, I think that's really another part of the Cure legacy is the austerity of the guitar sounds.
Nice buzzword.
Yes.
Robert Smith actually said this is the most perfect of songs because it has few words and little music. And it's said to be about the ease of seducing someone you sometimes love. Not all the time, sometimes.
Right.
Now let's talk Dom. Because I read you were once a dominatrix.
Yes.
What was your experience in the whip crack and cracks world?
I am not a good dominatrix, although I've gotten better with time. I'm much better now than I've ever been, and it's a proper thing to be a good dom when you're 51. So I think you come into a good space as a dom, like now in my 50s, I'm a better dom than ever. And all it is putting stuff in people's asshole. That's all it is, really. And it's just finding creative ways about that.
What's the most creative way to put something in somebody's asshole?
You go from the top down and around. So if they're laying on their back, you do a little like up and over.
Little squiggly do,
Yeah,
a little
an up and
Howard
over.
Johnson.
Or you're eating their ass and then you slip something else in.
Really?
Before they even realize it.
You know what one of my favorite things was, and we literally yesterday was the anniversary of my friend Angelo passing away, and we used to love the idea of when a girl sucks someone's dick backwards. So basically, like, her nose is by the asshole, and then she grabs the dick and kind of like folds it between the legs.
Oh, good.
It was.
It's called The Silence of the Lambs.
Is
yes.
it really? You know what?
No,
It makes perfect sense. It's the best. That's what it's called now. That's what it's called now. I love you. All right, that goes into object. Now, this was Robert Smith attempting to be knowingly unwholesome to write a sexist song. Peter, play 1:56.
But don't try to hold me, 'cause I don't want any ties. You're just an object in my eyes.
This is probably one of my favorites on the record. I love these lyrics. Don't try to hold me because I don't want any ties. You're just an object in my eyes. That's pretty real. That's pretty sexist too.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I wasn't expecting from Robert from this record. I thought he was a very loving person and sad and wanted to be appreciated. I didn't feel like he would throw that back onto somebody else.
Yeah, and maybe it's sort of also kind of like it could also be him talking about himself in the third person, or like that he's actually the person that is being sung about.
Sure, no, completely.
So it's kind of like this thing, but I do like that shift. You want to hear like dimension in songwriting, and I think that's good. It's like I think what's great about this song is the sound of it really goes with the lyrics.
Yeah.
The music really match.
No,
and,
completely.
It's great.
So you've been very candid about the different relationships you've been in. You've non-binary, polyamorous, and basically what someone call alternative sexuality.
Yeah.
Does sexism still exist in those relationships?
Yeah, it can. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. Definitely. I think that there is, especially like with submissive men, they kind of think, oh, well, I couldn't possibly be sexist because I worship women. And yet you still find that they're objectifying you, even though they're sort of like they're worshiping your feet and they're worshiping this and that. They don't care who they're worshiping. It's just, generic goddess that they're just plugging into this idea of a person. So you do have weird instances of objectification from submissive men, which I think people have a hard time really wrapping their head around, especially submissive men, because they don't realize that they're doing it. And so it's weird. I think that we've gone really far in terms of acceptance around different kinds of sexuality. There's relationships that I have that are no sex, only pain. That's kind of great too, where it's only impact play, like only beatings, only, you're a horse. Only you're a dog. You're only which I think that's really good. So you have more variance.
Oh, I think sex is finally starting to be accepted on, and I hate calling it alternative scale, but just it's like the world is changing. This country has been so covered, and we're still like there's still that large part of the community that wants to keep it like the 1950s, where it's like we don't talk about it, and now it's starting to become this awakening, and you're starting to see people be very open. I've always said this. It's like sex is the one thing God gave us that he guaranteed was like, this is something for you to feel good, to enjoy, to really be as alive as possible, because everything in your body is moving. So regardless if it's with a man and woman or two men or in pain, it's like whatever we do that is what we're into. It's your body, your time. You can do whatever the fuck you want, and I think it's great. I was with a dominatrix once. Not much happened. She tied me up and then like kind of catpawed my penis for about a half hour, and then released my hands, and then we had sex. But it was great. Just that catpawing was fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is fun.
The latest thing that I'm doing is dirty old man play.
Ooh, what is that?
So me and somebody else, usually a guy, put on dirty raincoats and then go to like some kind of adult bookstore and jerk off like dirty old men. Like, will we have like, some drink in a paper bag, which is, for me, it's like water. Yeah. And then we just like jerk off in like in the aisles of something, or like in like a coin operated booth.
Yeah, you're not doing this at a Barnes and Noble.
No. Like just like one of those really sleazy places, but it's really
Circus
funny.
of Books.
Yeah, like that's not out there anymore, but it would have been like a place like that.
Yeah.
Or we just do it at my house where we pretend we're at a bookstore. It's really funny and it's so exciting. Like I like being a man.
No, listen, I love being a guy, but I can imagine like sex has to be more like sensational for a woman. It's just, you have so much
stuff.
There's so much stuff that that we just have that one thing, and then the balls don't do anything. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? The balls are just there. Mm-hmm. It's like, women really have it way better. Why do you think certain men are submissive? Why do you think some guys are into being dommed?
I think it's just a matter of preference and kind of like the personality thing. Also, men have to be action-oriented in the world. So they're responsible for a lot of things. So it's great to be on the receiving end, which is basically what submission is just to be on the receiving end. So it's kind of just a reversal in a way because men are required to be so dominant in the world, no matter what it is. So it's... I think it's a reversal. I think it's also kind of a nice, like, you want to know your place. So I think it's, there's a lot of different motivations. Some guys really like financial domination because they feel like, all they're worth is their dollars.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a fun trick to kind of put onto that, to sexualize it. But that can be really kind of weird too.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of different things. But yeah, submission, I think, is an important thing for everyone to learn how to do and to enjoy, but some people just don't. But guys love it sometimes.
All right, jumping on someone else's train. This was the third standalone single the band released, and you can see why, because it is so fucking catchy. Peter, play a little bit of it for me.
If you pick up on it quick, you can say you were there. Again and again and again, you jump in someone else's train.
It is said that it came about after a discussion Robert Smith was having with Susie. Am I fucking it up?
Susie.
Okay, perfect. With Susie from Susie and the Banshees about how some bands would just lazily jump on other bands' innovative styles and ride the success that they hadn't earned. But it's also about self-consciously conforming to fads or trends, and especially like the underground subcultures. Like people were jumping on The Cure's goth train and started copying Robert Smith's look. And so that's so funny that he wrote this before that explosion really happened. And you can hear that in that clip that we played. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's really great. I mean, I think I think the song actually shares a lot with later Cure songs like Friday, I'm in Love Just Like Heaven. There's a kind of that thing that you hear a lot in Cure. So I love it sonically. I think that also that's got to be weird. Like if you're in a band and you're doing stuff and you're very different, and then you look out in the crowd and everybody looks like you.
Oh yeah,
I love that. Like I actually was touring with the Dresden Dolls and their rise to fame, and I remember the instance we were playing the Roundhouse in London, and he looked out in the crowd and everybody was dressed exactly like Amanda and Brian, and it was so trippy. Like, because it's like you had both of them. They're very unusual, on the stage in their sort of like gothic, sort of like Victorian thing, and then you look out in the crowd and they're all exactly the same. And maybe that is something that's like kind of scary for an artist, because it's like I just wanted to play my songs, but now I'm just looking at as people being me. But maybe that's also great.
Yeah,
like you have these armies at your disposal. It's awesome.
Have you seen any like? Let me rephrase that. Have you had any experiences like that where you've seen people like biting like what you've created?
I don't think so. I mean, I think comedy is very different. I mean, the way that I would say would be closer to me would be for me having there's a lot of great Asian American comedians who followed in my footsteps, like Bobby Lee and Awkwafina and certainly Ali Wong, so that's a great thing, but it's different with music because music has a kind of power where people want to emulate the band. They look at a band's style and they want to be that. Like, look at like Britpop, how everybody was wearing like their tracksuit zips all the way to their neck with the necklace coming out.
Basically how Steve Byrne dresses.
Yeah,
that's
so
Steve
cute.
Byrne wants to be an Oasis, so he
It's so
wears
great.
that same zip
I love
up.
it.
Yeah,
it's so cute. I mean, it's like a style moment with a pop star or a rock star, they can really have a huge impact on their fan base, on fashion in general. So I think that this song is appropriate for that kind of idea.
Yeah.
That maybe it's like, hey, it's my style.
Yeah, completely.
You want to keep it to yourself.
Was there any embarrassing trends that you jumped on?
Oh,
Go
God.
ahead, shit on your past. Come on.
Well, when I was started to do, I worshipped Paula Poundstone. And so I always wore like blazers and like a necktie.
Wait, do I remember this?
This is like before I was on television or
Oh
anything.
my God.
So this is like in the 80s. So I was doing comedy in the 80s and I wore like blazers and neckties like Ellen.
Yeah.
Like we were all the same, all the female comics.
Dude, Paula Poundstone is still, I think,
She's a genius.
Cats, what is it, Cats, Cops and Stuff is still one
She's
of
a
my
genius.
favorite specials.
She's an amazing comedian and, just somebody that's so cool. But yeah, I was definitely wearing a lot of bolo ties, which actually I do like.
You know what? Funny, like now you are so stylish. Like the second you showed up, I was like, dude, she's dressed exactly like I was hoping. Just rock star comic, and it's like you can pull off a bolo tie.
I think so
now but also you know so much more about fashion. Like,
yes.
You've really just I've been like probably out of all the comedians I know, you've been really at one of the forefronts of fashion.
Thank you.
I mean, with all the stuff that you've
Yes,
done.
yes.
And every time I've seen you, you look incredible.
Thank you.
So please put the blazer back on. Get the fucking piano tie.
It's so good. Well, now it's like, now it's an homage to Rick Ocasek.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I always want to dress like any member of the Cars, whether it's Ben Orr or Rick Ocasek.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But the Cars are very fashion. Anybody that was on Fridays, remember that show Fridays on ABC?
Oh, yeah, of course.
All of the music, that's all very new wave and very like rockabilly too. And their fashion is perfect. But the Cars were on there one time and they all wore like jumpsuits like Devo.
Oh, really?
It was really cool.
All right, that goes into Subway song. All right, so legend has it that Robert Smith used to lie to people about knowing someone that was murdered on the subway, and this was a fantasy song about that. In my opinion, it's sort of a cool like 60s beatnik tone poem with some snaps and some spy movie guitar. Peter, play right at the end of the fade when they really start to fuck with the listener. Like, why would he do that?
Well, it's classic, like hidden track jump scare.
Yeah.
It's basically just a jump scare.
Yeah.
Like, you're playing a game on the deep web.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
I love it.
This great song. But so he's talking about lying here. When have you gotten caught in a lie that blew up in your face?
I lied that I was in a college comedy competition. I was actually in the competition, but I lied about being in college. And it was a college comedy competition, and I won. And the other person who won was I won West Coast. Red Johnny and the Round Guy, who were like a comedy rap group, won the East Coast, and then John Glazer of Districted won the Midwest. And so we all participated, and we all opened for Jerry Seinfeld. And that's how I got my first MTV gig, doing MTV's Half Hour Comedy Hour. But I lied to get in the competition. And so I eventually told them that I wasn't in college, although they didn't really care at that point.
You were funny, so they didn't give a shit.
It didn't matter. But it was, I was really scared that it was going to be like this thing. But I came clean with it pretty soon afterwards. But it was, I was about the age that I would have been in college. I didn't even finish high school, so I was lying. Yeah.
No, dude. Lie. There's a difference between like a lie that can hurt people and then a little fib. That was a little fib. You knew you were funny enough.
Yes.
So that kind of blew up in your face, but I'll take that.
Yeah.
All right. And now on to the next song, which this next one really, really grew on me. Probably the most controversial song on the record, Killing an Arab. Play the chorus, Peter.
I'm alive. I'm dead. I'm a stranger. Killing an Arab.
This was based on French existentialist Albert Camus' 1942 novel, The Stranger. The demo of this song got the band signed and was the first single released by them. At the time, though, it was met with controversy due to it being misinterpreted as being racist and encouraging violence, and often had to be released with a warning sticker denying that. And then they also got a lot of flack for that again after the Gulf War, and then again after 9/11. Thoughts on the song?
Well, I think the song really rocks. Definitely, I heard the live version on the playlist you made me, and it's something that I think, what happened is around that time too, there was a lot of songs sort of like they were like incorporating like Orientalism. You have like Susie and the Banshees' Hong Kong Garden, and you have they did Israel, and they did all of these different kinds of things about sort of like Orientalist themes. And this is like another one of those. And, they wouldn't have been able to anticipate that there would be a whole like Muslim phobia. They wouldn't have anticipated 9/11. They wouldn't have
known, yeah.
Nobody would have known that this kind of thing would be misinterpreted. But you hear different kind of songs through history. Like there's another one called Black Korea by Ice Cube, which is in the 90s, all about the anger at Korean grocery stores.
Sure.
In South Central.
In South Central, yeah.
So, you have these instances of songs like this that are a real reaction, but this one is not. This is actually like the title's misinterpreted. So
Sure.
It's different because it's not a song about what it sounds like, but then people are just going to twist that and take it on, on face value.
I mean, you call something killing an Arab.
Yeah, they're just.
I mean, it's not just like killing a person. It's
Yeah.
like it's being specific to a certain race. You could see why there was controversy around it.
Of course, but it's like something that like they wouldn't have been able to anticipate the Islamophobia that was to come.
I mean, who knew? Who knew?
So it's interesting, but I think that's probably one of the reasons I was thinking why this album is kind of hard to find in its entirety in the streaming platform, because that song is on there and it's prominently featured. So I think that the historians will try to erase some things like this because it's the image of it is really unflattering to this great band because it's not what they are.
Not at all.
So I think that there's just justified controversy, and I'm sure that was in the minds of the record company too when they released it, because controversy used to be kind of something that sold records.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of thing where you wanted to be as dangerous as you could, and there wasn't as much of a consciousness around social media and being woke and stuff like that. So this kind of stuff was used to sell products in a way back in that time.
No, completely. What about you? What was your most controversial career moment?
I think that it's for me, it's a lot of the one time I was on the Golden Globes with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and so the interview had just come out, the movie about North Korea. And North Korea was like doxing Sony.
Yeah, I
at
remember
the time.
that.
That was crazy. And so I played like a North Korean representative coming to the Golden Globes, and because I wanted to take a picture with Meryl Streep. And so this whole thing, and then I got like really like I think I got canceled. It was 2015, and I got canceled for like a day. And I was trending on. It's weird when you're trending like #1 on Yahoo, and you're like, what? Why? And like something bad must be going on. So people were really pissed. But I actually think it was North Korea. North Korean bots kind of like got mad at the impression of like Kim Jong whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the most like crazy. But it was really insane for a while.
Do you get flack from other Koreans like about some of the comedy and
No.
just it's never
No.
come up?
No, because it's such a honest portrayal of what Koreanness is.
Yeah.
But where I get issues is like from white people who are like, well, that's racist. When you're doing
Fucking white people, man.
If you do an Asian accent, it's racist. But I was like, well, my mom talks like that, so it would be weird if I didn't have an impression like
Yeah,
that.
it'd be weird if your mom was like, "Hi, Margaret, let's go to the market."
Yeah, it's a very strange double standard in that. But I think it's sort of like you have to roll with it. Like as a comedian, we're just all like kind of in this different space now where we really have to go forward and still try not to be afraid.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who do that very well. So it's good, but it's something that we have to really deal with.
No, completely. All right, Fire in Cairo. This dreamy and sexy song fits in with some of the other Middle Eastern-y sounds on here. There are some heavy-handed, poetic, suggestive lyrics like Shifting Crimson Veil, Silken Hip Slide, Under My Hand, Swollen Lips Whisper. But the band were barely past their teenagers, so their entire love life up until then might have only been, just like, middle school shit. And also, good luck singing this part. Peter, play minute 15.
F-I-R-E-I-N-C-I-I-O-O. F-I-R-E-I-N-C-I-I-O-O. Then the heat disappears and the mirage fades away.
I love this song. I think it's great. And I think it is that sort of the Orientalist themes kind of continuing on. And yeah, it does. It's definitely like the hollowness of the guitar sound and the percussion. It's like you hear a lot of Love and Rockets or Tones on Tail, like these sort of later sort of incarnations of Bauhaus. It is the perfect sort of goth song with that kind of, it does have like those, Middle Eastern music is sometimes on a different scale, like sonically.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like you have these different sounds, these different chords. And I think, it's a really great snapshot of the era.
No, I love those lyrics. I really do. It's just, it's some of the stuff, it's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. Now, you've written in depth about your early issues with brutal bullying and negative sexual experiences. When did you first feel beautiful and accepted?
I think like it really had to probably be in my late 20s. Like it didn't feel great for a while. And it's unfortunate because I really missed out on the sort of feeling young and beautiful, but you have to claim it for yourself. So maybe around 27, 28, then I started to really understand. But when you're growing up, it's very difficult. And also you don't see a lot of Asian Americans like you on TV and in movies or whatever. It's hard. I didn't have a sense of like other Asians in show business until I delved into Hong Kong cinema really deeply in my 20s, and then sort of got a sense of like these other movie stars and this other world. So it took me a while, but yeah, I definitely had to come to it later.
So what was the hardest thing to overcome then?
I think just feeling like body issues, like feeling sense of dissatisfaction with where I was like physically, and really like misusing exercise and dieting is as a sort of a form of punishment, for the body, and that's not the right way to go about it. So now I have a much more of a holistic like sensibility around all of those aspects of my life, and it's really helped. But it's certainly something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Has that affected your art?
I think it's always going to, but in comedy you can look whatever the fuck you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you could. This is the profession where you could. The shittier you look, the funnier
the better
you
it is.
are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people don't even they don't trust a pretty woman on stage. They just don't. And so there's like, beautiful women in comedy that have to overcome. It's like a disability.
Yeah.
And a lot of beautiful women in comedy have done that very successfully. But yeah, you do have like this moment of distrust if you have a beautiful girl coming on stage as a comic and people are like, what? No.
Yeah, completely. All right, going on to the next song, Another Day. This one was okay. We're going to pass through this one because this song is literally about seasonal depression. It's a great driving song, but very sad. So we're going to skip it. Going on to Grinding Halt. Peter, play the chorus at 46 seconds.
Stop, short, grind and halt. Everything's coming to a grinding halt.
All right, so this was written by the drummer, but then Robert Smith cut off each verse lyric after a couple words to highlight its meaning about decay and apathy. I know that this song is about sad shit, but it's really upbeat.
Yeah.
Musically, not lyrically. What are your thoughts on it?
It is. It's poppy. It's boppy. It's actually very upbeat. And it's kind of like... it's funny because you almost don't hear the sadness. I don't, even though the lyrics are sad, but it's not, it's quite a happy song.
Yeah, very happy. Let's talk about the Grinding Halt though, just the title. So I know you've had a bunch of negative experiences around your 1994 sitcom All American Girl, which reflected your stand-up at the time, but our listeners want to know what happened. Can you please share your experience?
Oh, well, so I had a TV show, but it was really, I was a comic I was really dirty comic, and I was flourishing on HBO, but when they tried to translate it into a Disney television show, ABC, it was really not the right thing. But I mean, I got a good experience working in television. I just didn't take the power to realize it was my show. I kind of thought I was an employee, but I didn't realize I was a star. And that's the main mistake. But I think that, and that's where I got a really bad sort of body issues time, because it was like the era of heroin chic, so I was like too fat to play the role of myself. And so I had to like lose a bunch of weight, and it was really hard. And I got really sick, and I think that my attention was so focused on being thin that I was like not paying attention to like writing or whatever. And there were some good moments in the show. We had a lot of good times, but at the same time, it was really challenging. And for the Korean community, it was right after the LA riots. So they were very protective of their image. And so it was very hard to kind of put across this idea of an Asian American show, because they didn't want to be a part of that. So it was challenging. But, when it was canceled, it really made me realize like, oh, I've just got to work on being a good comic. And then my comedy career really flourished, because I was much more focused on good material and writing and getting out there and touring. And so that's when my life, I feel like, really began as a stand-up comic.
All right. The next song is something we might be in very shortly. World War. Peter, play 35 seconds in.
Mud, trench, meat, stand by the land is looking on. Creepy when I look along. This'll be the big one. World War.
So this song and Object were put on the original Three Imaginary Boys album by the record company, despite Robert Smith's objections. But he disliked them so much that he got them cut off from most CD releases of this record. It's pretty much just another basic anti-war, anti-fascist protest song. Good song. Thoughts on it?
I love it. I love how driving it is. I love how rocking it is. It's definitely something that's very timely, even though it's written many, many years ago. Yeah.
All right, we come to the final song on this record, Three Imaginary Boys. So this is the title of the band's UK debut, which is from where they compiled most of these songs from the US debut. Peter, play a minute 50 into the song, into the solo.
Three imaginary boys singing my sweet child on moon well train your mind.
Just haunting. Just so powerful. And I feel like this is a great way to end the record, because this is like I said earlier, like The Cure kind of became goth from this. Like this is like them right at the beginning of where it's starting to get maybe a little dark. But it's like this song is just a perfect example of that.
Well, because it's like with the chords, you're actually walking down steps into the churchyard. Like you're going from the church into the graveyard.
Oh, God, what a perfect analogy. All right, so this song is about a dream Robert Smith had. It also seems to be about loneliness, depression, and possibly Sigmund Freud's idea that our minds are divided into three imaginary parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. Pretty good. You want to do some facts and get out of here?
Yes.
Let me think of a song. Facts. Facts. All right. It's a hard album to sing the songs to, people. Okay. Due to the lasting controversy of the song Killing an Arab, on several tours and in the 2000s, the song had some lyric and title changes, including Kissing an Arab, Killing Another, and Killing an Ahab, with references to Moby Dick. Now, you are one of the most outspoken comedians that I know of and that I love. When did you, or have you ever had to censor yourself?
I did a show one time that was broadcast across MGM Grand, the theme park in Orlando.
Epcot Center?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was so dirty. And they got so mad at me. But I didn't realize it was going to be blasted across the park. It was a New Year's Eve gig, and it was I had to do an hour, and they blasted it across the park. This is in the 90s, and it's so funny to think about.
I can just imagine you like, so just being a dom is just sticking stuff in other people's asshole, and it's just like
in the 90s in like a theme park. But I don't know who they were thinking that was going to be there, so it's funny.
But did you change your set?
No, because I didn't know. I didn't know until after the fact.
How great.
It's so funny.
Would you have changed if you'd known?
I don't think I could have. I don't know if I could have done a clean set. I've never done a clean set anywhere.
All right. Last fact. Although they've been called goth forever, Robert Smith rejects that description and says he doesn't even really like the music described as goth.
Interesting.
And as for the band's legacy in that genre, he says, I don't worry about my epitaph, for instance. I don't want to be remembered for anything in particular other than being in a pop group that was good. All right, so this is a two-part question. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think that it was good, that it was funny, that people laughed, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What would your goth name be?
Oh,
like Ravenclaw or
yes,
something?
Cynthia Scythe.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
Thank you.
Oh, it's Margaret Cho. Dougal. For all things Margaret, like tickets to her Fresh Off the Bloat tour, you can find that and all things Margaret. Go to margaretcho.com. Follow her on Instagram at Margaret_Cho and on Twitter at Margaret Cho. Don't forget, listen to her podcast, The Margaret Cho, every Tuesday, and it's available everywhere you get your pods. I'll be posting Margaret's Spotify mixtape, and you can find that on our website, the500podcast.com. Now, we just listened to The Cure from 1980. For new music this week, our music director, Little Maddie Pinfield, selected Night Riots. Formed in 2010, Night Riots are a 5-piece alternative band from San Luis Obispo, California. Heavily influenced by The Cure and other 80s UK new romantic bands, Night Riots have made a name for themselves in the indie scene. Their first alternative hit, Contagious, made top 20 in 2014. Their latest album, which was released late last year, called New State of Mind, continues to show Robert Smith's influence on both their songwriting and vocal style. Check out that link on our website, the500podcast.com. And if you were in a band and were directly influenced by one of these albums or artists and you want your music featured on the 500 website, send your song to 500podcast@gmail.com and make sure you put the album and artist that influenced you in the subject line. Next week is Lil Wayne week with his 2008 album, The Carter 3. So y'all got some homework to do. Listen to the album on Spotify. Stay fleecy.